Hello and welcome to Deep Dive. My name is Joel Z. Williams, and an old mentor of mine once told me when you're doing any kind of public speaking, you first want to give a little bit about yourself. You want to tell the crowd what you're going to talk about, and lastly, you want to tell them how they can benefit from whatever you're going to discuss. So a little bit about me. I do this as a hobby. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree from Missouri State University, but I currently work in the legal profession. But this is a hobby of mine. So I'm not a scientist, don't have a PhD, but I think it's important to do this kind of work for the following reason. I enjoy a lot of nonfiction authors, and so I watch a lot of book TV, National Geographic, a lot of Smithsonian. I even enjoy the Joe Rogan show, especially when he has on really what I call interesting authors. The problem on programs like that is once the ideas are presented and the evidence is submitted, the conversation kind of ends there. If you've ever noticed this with Joe Rogan's episodes in particular on YouTube, he'll have a really fascinating guest. They'll have a really good organic conversation. It's fascinating, right? 2-3 hours of uninterrupted interview, really compelling ideas, and then it's over. You know, and you go back to the comment section there, and it's a nightmare. People are talking about things that are totally irrelevant. They're making personal attacks on people. It's just really not a good way to continue the conversation. So what I thought I'd do is create this platform where we can all talk about a nonfiction book in greater depth. We can go into it and really drill down how you will benefit from it. I think this should be a marketplace of ideas. And what I mean by that is, like when you go to the grocery store, you go to the produce section, for example, and you're going to buy a tomato. The grocery store presents you immediately with all the tomatoes that they have available, right? It's up to you to go through that pile and determine, okay, this one's too green, this one looks a little too ripe. You know, they present you with all the available options, and you select the one that you think is the one that is most like the one you want. So that's why I do this, and I think that's how you're going to benefit from it. Now, backing up, another compelling reason why I did this, the reason I chose this book to do first, this is Graham Hancock's Magicians of the Gods. This is the first one we're going to review here. Okay, now this is a book that was published in 2015. I think it's Thomas Dunn Books, St. Martin's Griffin from New York, in 2015. The reason why I think I chose this author first is because exactly what I was talking about, this marketplace of ideas. I see too many times that the ivory tower, if you will, the people in power, in academia, modern academia, these are the people who are the Egyptologists, the archaeologists, the botanists, the neuroscientists, the archaeologists, I probably already said that, the anthropologists. These are the professionals who stake their reputations and their living on their works and their discoveries. And so as a consequence, they inherently have a bias against people positing ideas that are contrary to the accepted norm. And what I want this to be is, I don't want to be a gatekeeper. I want to present you with all the facts and the evidence supporting it without drawing a conclusion. I want you to be able to shop, if you will, using that same analogy, and pick out the one that you think is most accurate and most credible. And so the correlation, I guess I should say, between Graham Hancock and that concept of marketplace of ideas is this is a man who has been spurned by the academic, what would you say? I want to say nobility? The people the gatekeepers who act as the arbiters of what is accepted science. And back in 1995, the book that really put Graham Hancock on the map was this one here, Fingerprints of the Gods. In this book, he posited some really unorthodox, to put it loosely, ideas about ancient civilizations and that may have predated our current civilization here on Earth. You know, it was met with just vociferous, they just dug in their heels. They absolutely called him everything from a pseudoscientist to a crackpot. I mean, they really launched a campaign to silence him about these ideas. And the reason why is because these ideas were directly antithetical to accepted mainstream archaeology, modern science. And so what Graham Hancock represents to me is somebody who is not a scientist. He has a background as a journalist, is a former reporter, but he's making these very, very hard to explain observations. And consistently, since the printing of this book over 20 years ago, more and more of his assertions have been validated. And in particular, a finding at a place in, I guess it would be southeastern Turkey, Anatolia, called Gobekli Tepe. It's a local, I think it stands for Potbelly Hill in the local language. This is a site that was first, I think, noticed back in 1963, but was really excavated in earnest beginning, I believe that was 1994. A German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt took his team from I think it's called the German Archaeology Research Institute. But they did some finding. And at this site, Gobekli Tepe has proved to be very, very problematic for the old dogma of the entrenched archaeologist. And in particular, let me just give you some facts here on Gobekli Tepe. There's more than 200 T-shaped pillars found. These are megalith structures, large structures, some over 20 feet tall, tons in weight, and over 20 circular enclosures that they found so far. Right. This is a area that probably is about 300 square meters and is huge. And so they haven't even excavated all of it. But what they have found so far, because this culture intentionally buried Gobekli Tepe, roughly, let's see, 8,000. So it'd be roughly 5,000 years after it was started. For some reason, unknown to us still, the civilization intentionally buried it, entombed it in rock and stone, I guess ostensibly to preserve it for modern finding. We don't know. The science is still not clear on that. But the irrefutable fact is that Gobekli Tepe, because it had been entombed like that, has been able to be dated. The artifacts found have been able to be dated to roughly 12,000 years ago. Now that's a problem for mainstream archaeology because as they have it, there were no megalithic structures prior to 6,000 years ago. So this is almost double in age, I should say. The prior finding, I think it was a location in Malta. Modern archaeologists were all in a consensus. Yeah, that's the earliest it could be, because they always said that you had to have agriculture to support large numbers of humans to move these rocks and put them in place in the first place. And Gobekli Tepe is a clear-cut example that this is a hunter-gatherer group. These are, I guess the modern-day example, we have Khoisan, the San people in Africa. The Bushmen of the Kalahari from Botswana and South Africa. These are hunter-gatherer groups, right, that essentially live in the Stone Age. And contemporaneously with us, with the same time that we are living with our cell phones and our airplanes, we have people on this planet who are practicing ancient means of survival and sustenance. And Gobekli Tepe is irrefutable proof that that's one place like that. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I started this book. Let's talk about the format for the program. Now, what I wanted to do is make a weekly show where we take a book. I would give a brief synopsis at the beginning about what the book was about, and then I would pick 10 of the most salient points, the 10 points that I think require further examination, or maybe on the Joe Rogan show they didn't cover this particular point, or maybe on Book TV, Brian Lamb didn't ask the author this question. I want to go into it further. I want to get more information about that. So I'm going to pick 10 what I call highlights of the book and go over it. Lastly, I'm going to, being African American, I've been on YouTube for about 12 years now doing other projects, but I have never seen so much overt racism as I've seen lately. I think it's just part of the political climate that we're in. But I wanted to preface this by saying on my channel, I'm not going to censor any comments or any replies unless you're either not contributing to the conversation, you're saying something that is completely irrelevant to what we're talking about, or you make racist or homophobic or anything like that. If you're making personal attacks on people, there's really not a place for that here. But conversely, if you have a competing theory, or maybe you think this is not accurate and you want to give your evidence or maybe assert your reason why this is not the case, I certainly want to hear that. Again, this is a marketplace for ideas. Any tomato on that produce aisle is available for you. I just want to present them all and allow you to make that choice. So that's really going to be the format for the show. All right, let's get to the meat of the book. I think what this book, Magicians of the God, I think what Graham Hancock is trying to do is give some more credence to the same positions that he argued in his first book. I think the lapse of time that has occurred, I guess it's over 15 years since he wrote the precursor, there has been a lot of developments that have proven his wild assertions back in 1995 have now been vindicated. And I think he wrote the book. Matter of fact, I generally don't like buying paperback books, but he has included 2 additional chapters. This book was originally published in 2015. It's 2020 as we go to tape here. But the only way to get the additional 2 chapters is to buy the paperback. And so, and of course, in the paperback, the abridged, the updated version, you're going to hear about Gobekli Tepe in particular, and I think he's added a lot more geological evidence that has been discovered. So I think really to understand Magicians of the Gods, you have to see it as kind of a furthering of his fleshing out of his initial propositions that there was an advanced civilization, and that we currently have amnesia as a civilization, that we don't recall, we can't remember our predecessors, and the idea that there are really, really tremendous similarities amongst these megalithic cultures around the globe, and we'll get into that. The first criticism that Graham Hancock had to really overcome when he first started was, where's your proof? Where's your evidence? You say all these advanced civilizations existed prior to at the end of the Ice Age, what is known as the Pleistocene era, and now we are in what is known as the Holocene era. That's the modern era that we live in, and scientists, orthodox scientists would always jam him up and say, well, where's your proof? Where's the fossil records? Where's the campfires? Where's the animal bones? Where's all the evidence? Well, to be honest, to be quite frank with you, the beginning of the book, I would say that probably the first third of the book is very dry, and it's about geology, and I don't particularly find geology that fascinating, but he goes with a geologist named Randall Carlson, and also a geologist out of Boston University named Robert Schlock, and they go into really great detail, and I think almost overkill, to explain how if you had an ice sheet that was two miles thick in most areas, and that ice sheet suffered, or the Earth suffered a major cataclysm from an impact from a meteor or a comet, the melting, the immediate melting of all that ice water would create such a massive flood on the scale that we can't even comprehend, that it would literally grind anything in its path as those rivers, those torrents, those lakes, oceans, if you will, of frozen water would begin to melt, moving huge amounts of boulders and rocks in their wake. It would just crush anything, just pulverize anything in its path. And they go into great lengths to go to what is known as the scablands. You can see this in Washington State, all the way through the northern Midwest, through Wisconsin, through Michigan, all the way to the Great Lakes, Minnesota. You can see these ripples on the land, and you see what are known as glacial erratics. These are huge, massive boulders that contain rock that are not native to that location. In fact, some of these glacial erratics come from hundreds of miles away, which indicates that there was a large, massive flood that would have decimated, absolutely ruined anything in its path, and would have destroyed anything in its path. And moreover, that seawater rise around the globe of I think 30 to 40 feet overnight is what they're estimating, would have submerged over 13 million miles of coastline around the globe. When we think about if we were to have a major cataclysm such as that today, in America, for example, most of our largest cities, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, you name it, most of our largest population centers are on the coast. And if we incurred a massive extinction level event like that, those cities would be immediately submerged under hundreds of miles of water. And moreover, the force of the ice that is melting, containing these large rocks, would pulverize anything underneath it. You're talking ice sheets 2 miles thick. I can't even imagine the weight of that, you know? So he goes through great length to prove up his idea that one of the most compelling reasons why there is no fossil record of these things is because they simply have been totally destroyed or underwater currently. And we know for a fact that the underwater excavation, modern what do they call it? Subterranean, or when you go under the water to do archaeology, is almost always limited to finding shipwrecks. We can find the Titanic because there's money for that, right? People are going to spend money for that. People are not investing money to go down and underwater and research these potential sites. So he goes into great detail to explain that, and I think that is proof that that criticism was it hit home to him. Another big criticism of Graham Hancock's theory of a great global civilization that existed prior to ours and was wiped out in this cataclysm was, I saw this best by, I can't remember the producer, but he made a YouTube video, and he was a contrarian. He thought Graham Hancock's ideas were too far-fetched. And one of the reasons he posited is he called it fancy as shag. And what he was talking about is Graham Hancock's overarching theory is that because this very advanced prior civilization, they had knowledge of astronomy, they kind of predicted that they were going to get hit by some extinction level event. And so they took precautions to go ahead and try to send ambassadors around the globe to try to disseminate the technology that they had to other humans that happen to be in more primitive states of technological advancement. That's basically the overall premises of the book, is that Hancock is positing this theory that this ancient civilization or civilizations did not want us to have to start again as children, that they wanted to kind of give us a leg up on what they knew, the technology that they knew, to less advantaged people, so to further the cause of human on the planet. That's the overarching idea. And so what the critics say, well, why is there no fossil? Why is there? We can't find it in the genetic markers? Why don't we see that we're to believe that these ancient magicians of the gods traveled across the globe, transmitting these very advanced technologies, and didn't manage to have some sexual relations with the people they encountered? That we won't find any of that in the DNA? What's up with that? It's strange credulity. Can't pronounce my words today. It's strange credence to believe that that would have happened without some type of exchange of DNA, right? Well, since the book was written, there is a geneticist out of the University of Copenhagen. His name is Eski Wilkerslev. He's an evolutionary geneticist. This guy, I think he came to prominence because there was a tribe, a Native American tribe in New Mexico, who apparently there was some remains found, and I think it was an oil and gas company. The oil and gas company wanted to remove these remains, get them out of the way so they could drill. And the Native American, asserted, hey, this is our property and this is probably our ancestor, and no, we don't want him or her destroyed, in that manner. And so they hired this guy, this expert out of Denmark. They hired him, and he came out and started doing surveys of the the first peoples that live in that area, and I think it was New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, in that region, and took a really good sampling size of DNA from people, started examining it, and in fact did prove up that, yeah, this particular skeletal remains did belong to that tribe. So they won. But he didn't stop there. He went into Latin America and started doing DNA analysis of indigenous folks there. And in Brazil, they found a lady who had a lot of DNA that belongs to Melanesian people. Now, to give you an idea of how groundbreaking that is, and how that throws a spanner in the Orthodox archaeology community, when you do the Google map search and you look at Brazil, part of the Amazon where this woman was found, and you find the closest distance to Melanesian people, you have to travel 10,000 miles by sea across water. Now, why is that a problem? That's a problem because of the accepted view of what is known as Clovis first theory, that we have early humans coming out of the East Rift Valley, out of Africa, East Africa in particular, heading through the Mediterranean, heading to the Levant, to the Mediterranean, migrating over to Asia, migrating up to Europe, crossing through Asia into America, as we would know it now, North America, using the Bering Strait, or Baringa, as they call it, and then peopling the Americas, and then going down into Latin America. That has been the traditional view of the peopling of Americas for over 100 years, right? This evidence says, might have been a problem with that, and it's incontrovertible. That's what's so problematic about Graham Hancock, is he can't say with absolute certainty that this happened, but all he does is posit the evidence, and to the experts, to the gatekeepers of the information that we receive, and say, how do you explain this? And they hate him for that, because the clear, simple fact is they cannot. And that's why this book is so important. The far-flung DNA. And we see it even in Levanta, in a city in Mexico. We have a tribe called the Olmec people, who are essentially, that is a word for the rubber people. That's how the Mayans knew them, because they lived in a rubber-producing region. But if you look at the statues that were left behind, the megalithic statues that are left by the Olmec people, these are clearly people of some Polynesian or African descent. I mean, we got the proverbial wide lips. The person looks like me, has features like me, right? What we would consider to be Native American features. These are more African, more Polynesian features. So this is problematic for them in many ways. So that's one of the big things that they cover in the book. The other thing I want to talk about is Robert Schlock and his work and the late John Anthony West. They went to the great statue of Giza, the Sphinx. The Sphinx. Forgive me, I have a neurological injury that I suffered when I was in the military, and it makes my eye blink uncontrollably sometimes in fits. So please bear with me. But Robert Schlock went to the Great Pyramid at Giza. This is a board-certified, credentialed geologist from Boston University, a leader in his field, well-respected individual. This is not a crackpot geologist. He goes to the Great Sphinx at Giza, and he says, within 2 minutes of being there, he looked at the weathering panel, weathering erosion on this enclosure of the Sphinx, and as well as the Sphinx itself. And he says within 2 minutes he was able to determine this is not 6,000 years old. This happened, this type of erosion is not from blowing wind and sand. This is precipitation type erosion. And that's problematic in many ways, because we know the situation where the three great pyramids and the statue of the Sphinx is located in Egypt on the Nile is adjacent to the Sahara Desert. And we know that the Sahara Desert hasn't had precipitation in over 10,000 years. So that's a problem. When you're talking about a really experienced geologist taking samples and telling you with incontrovertible evidence and data to back it up, yeah, this thing is older than 6,000 years ago. In fact, they believe it's at least 12,000 and maybe even older. So that's a problem for mainstream Egyptologists who have built their entire careers on this idea that, civilization as we know it begins in the Fertile Crescent, somewhere between the Tigris and Euphrates River in Mesopotamia. There's agriculture comes first, then animal husbandry. We learn how to breed livestock, convert wild animals into domesticated animals, and then we stop hunting and gathering, and we start gathering in large groups, and that produces the labor force that, with the grain and the livestock, we are now able to feed a large population, and now we can move these large blocks. It makes sense for them. This is their rationale on why there has to be agricultural science developed prior to these megalithic buildings, because otherwise you've got a bunch of hunter-gatherers who follow animals. I mean, think about Plains Indians, for example, here in America. Especially the Sioux or the Iroquois. You're dealing with people who are essentially following bison, who have teepees, that portable structures that are built so that they can quickly collapse them, fold them up, put them behind animals, and drag them themselves, and follow the bison herd, and hunt and kill the bison and feed off of them, use their coats to make clothing and shelter, and so that is the traditional notion of hunter-gatherer, is that you have to be nomadic and able to sustain a large group of humans with high caloric intake requirements, But that's problematic if you have a situation like Gobekli Tepe, where there's no evidence of large agriculture anywhere nearby. Matter of fact, there's not really a close-by water source that would support hundreds or thousands of people that would be required, using the old models, to put these megaliths together. So that's problematic. But going back to the Egyptian thing, so another problem is the scale. How do you build something so large and so precise if it is older than 6,000 years ago, prior to what we assume civilization had knowledge of astronomy and stars, right? There's an incontrovertible fact about the pyramid at Giza, is that on the spring equinox, on May 21st of each year, on the dawning of that sun, the sun is going to be directly in front of the Sphinx at Giza. So that happens every year. So how do you explain that? If they didn't have knowledge of the stars, right? That's a problem. And as a matter of fact, he goes into great depth about how other megalithic structures around the globe, whether it's Machu Picchu, the Godang Padang in Indonesia, Angkor Wat in Cambodia, all of these megalithic structures share one common thing. They're all equinoctial markers. In other words, you can time up when the sun is going to be directly in front of one of those pyramids. It's either going to be the spring equinox, the winter equinox, but they're all equinoctial markers. How does that occur? If you don't have knowledge of precession of the planets. All right, I don't want to get into the weeds on precession of the planets, but suffice it to say that every 12,000 years or so, the Earth will make a revolution through all of the houses of the zodiac. So what we consider to be, Cancer, Capricorn, Leo, you name it, the sun, the Earth will make a revolution through all of those in about 12,000 years. Each degree of that cycle takes about 72 years, right? Well, that's about the lifespan of a human, right? Modern human, as we know it. How do you transmit that knowledge? How do you even understand precessional planet precession if you're not able, because no person can live for 12,000 years and see the big picture. How do you know that? Unless you're passing that information down from generation to generation. And how do you do that? Graham goes into a great dissertation about Hamlet's Mill. And this is a book written back in '67. It's very, very mathematical. It's written by a professor at MIT and another professor from Germany, Frankfurt, I believe. And it's very technical. It's very dense reading. It's very hard to get at. But the ultimate finding is that these great megalithic structures are all basically the story that they tell is also found in myths that are shared around the world. And let me just try to paraphrase here for brevity, but they use the concept of an old-fashioned mill. Think of a large rolling round mill stone that has a pole, if you will, in the middle, and it goes in a circle grinding grain as it goes around, and that rotation is similar to the precession of the planets. And what they're positing here is that by telling stories, like Graham Hancock thinks The Lion King is an example of these myth stories that contain the story of a cataclysm pending, knowledge of a shaman or someone knowing that this is coming, a warning to people to do something, get ready for it, at the cataclysm occurring, and then a rebirth. And so you see the story again, time and time again, in myth all around the world. Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet, probably being one of the most famous example. But that type of story, that there is going to be an impending cataclysm, the gods are mad, they're going to do something about it to destroy humans. Humans get a tip by a God that's favorable to them. They are told to do something about it. They start transmitting technology and getting it around, and then the cataclysm happens, and then there's a rebirth with the knowledge that was transmitted, so they don't have to begin again as children, right? So that's another interesting component of the book that I think deserves further consideration. Also, let's talk about the phenomenon that at many of these megalithic sites we see the same figurine depicted, and this is typically a kind of a stick figure with the head of a bird, or sometimes it's a serpent. And there's always been a speculation: why is that occurring? Why is this so common? No matter where we find it in the world, why is it the same type of symbology? Why do we keep seeing this crop up? There's a astrophysicist, Dr. Anthony Perrott, from the Los Alamos in New Mexico. I think he's now a professor at the University of New Mexico. But he was talking about, in his laboratory, he created a replica of what they call a coronal mass ejection, a solar flare, if you will. We now see it here on Earth as the aurora borealis, with the northern lights. Okay, and one of the phenomenons that he was able to reproduce in his laboratory is using electrical, what do they call it, plasma discharge formations. He was able to create an image that always kind of kept the same look. Depending on, you know, the situation, how much voltage they applied or how much plasma particles they put, but it would always have the same general image. And it looks like a stick figure human with a kind of a bird head. And he was able to produce this multiple times in the laboratory. And the theory is maybe an early civilization saw this in the sky, and it was immediately followed by cataclysm, and they immediately tied the two together. And they said, oh my God, this is, because it would look like a god. It has human-like features. Again, it looks like a stick figure of a human. I'll try to put some pictures of them up on the video. But you can imagine how a hunter-gatherer group of people would ascribe godlike attributes to this image that they see in the sky if right after or soon after seeing it, there's major floods and all kinds of electrical storms and cataclysm. That may be the reason why we're seeing this commonality. All right. So that was another theory that I thought needed. Also, let's talk about the signs of advanced chemistry, early advanced chemistry. Now, going into the Amazon, in many parts of the world, there are psychotropic drugs that people have used. We know of the blue water lily, for example, in the Nile Delta region in that area, even in the Mesopotamia. We know of the, what is it called, Muscat Amarak, the magic mushroom. We know of psilocybin in peyote and mescaline. We know of DMT in the Amazon. But you know, how do we explain the use, for example, in the Amazon jungle? You have over 150,000 different plants in this massive jungle, and here native people, people native to that region, have picked out two, and not only have they picked out two, they've picked out. Let me just back up. So DMT, dimethyltryptamine, is a very powerful what do you call it? Hallucinogenic. Forgot what they call it, but it is a hallucinogenic. But if you smoke it, it will only get you a hallucinogenic experience for about 15 minutes. But if you grind it up and mix it with what they call a monoamine oxide inhibitor, we know it as the MaO2 inhibitor, you can drink it, and the lasting effects will last for hours. How do you know that, right? First of all, you have to find out that this one is psychoactive, right? The first component, the first compound, right? That's a major hurdle in and of itself. But then you have to have such great knowledge of the chemistry of the botany around you that you have to be, okay, this one contains an MaO2 inhibitor, which is going to fool my metabolism in my gut to not break down this psychotropic drug so that I can have the effect for longer periods of time. How does that happen? Unless you have some kind of advanced knowledge of chemistry. So that's a problem for mainstream archaeologists. The advanced bowl making. I really hate to call them bowls. These are basically, they look like pottery that you'll find in the Old Kingdom, Egypt. But there are many other examples of them are made of some of the hardest stone known to man, and they're beautiful. They're absolutely gorgeous. They're perfectly round. You can tell that whoever created these really knew what they were doing, but they're not made of clay. They're made out of solid rock. to make it even more difficult, they are very hard rock. How do you create some of these tiny apertures? Some of these bowls and pots, vases, for lack of a better term, have very tiny aperture that even modern people who make pottery will tell you, you can put it on a lathe, but you're going to break it. We just don't have the technology to grind through this hard stone at such a narrow aperture without breaking it. It's virtually impossible. And I don't want to get into a big discussion about it, but once you see the work and you see how old it is, it's a problem. You're talking about people who hadn't even invented bronze, or somehow have the technology to carve and polish this very, very, very hard rock, and it beggars belief. So that's another problem. There's one other item I want to cover, and then I'm just going to open it up. This is probably the most controversial thing Graham Hancock has posited, and I'm just going to attack it head on because I don't think there's any way to dance around it. Graham Hancock's one of his most problematic, I'm going to go ahead and be gratuitous and say problematic, theory is that early humans interacted with psychotropic drugs, and that enabled us to see things in a way where we put more emphasis on helping one another than engaging in warfare. And one of probably the most controversial positions that he has taken is that Mother Ayahuasca, what he considers to, because many people who go under the influence of these psychotropic drugs say the same thing, is that they encounter a female character, that a wise character that speaks to them and basically says, I'm glad you came, now I can communicate with you. And that using these psychotropic drugs puts humans on the same plane where we can interact with these great teachers. As a matter of fact, there's tribes in the Amazon that they call it the vine of the dead. Ayahuasca is what they imagine is that they are encountering the spirit of their ancestors through the use of these chemicals. So that is probably the most controversial. I would say, is it though? Is it when you see the art with these really geometric patterns, and you see the similarities of people who are under the influence of DMT, and then they come out of that experience, they immediately write down what they saw. You see a lot of similarities in the geodesic patterns. Is it a stretch to see that these people might be opening up a communication channel, if you will? Like we sense, we taste, see, feel, but maybe there's another sense that we have that we're just not attuned to unless we're in that state. Is that such a wild stretch? I think at this time it is certainly controversial, but I'm going to leave it up to you. I'm going to encourage you to read the book, and I really look forward to some really smart discussion. Let's go ahead and get into it. Again, my name is Joel Z. Williams, and I am your neighborhood grocer in this marketplace of ideas. Thank you for joining.